5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Drop that.
Welcome to the Test Guild Automation Podcast. We're all getting together to learn more about software testing and automation with your host, Joe Colantonio.
Hey, it's Joe, and welcome to another episode of the Test Guild Automation Podcast. Today, we'll be talking with Adam Goucher all about automation and the importance of infrastructure. Adam is the CTO of the mobile experience company in Element 34. He was an early innovator in contributing to many open source testing projects. And one time, I believe he was actually the lead maintainer of Selenium IDE. He was the creator and maintainer of PySaunter, a Python-based automation framework, a creator and maintainer for Saunter PHP, a PHP automation framework. Adam also has written a number of books like Beautiful Testing for O'Reilly Media and has spoken at a bunch of conferences like ORDEV and many Selenium conferences. So listen up and find out why Adam really doesn't care about your automated tests. Check it out. The Test Guild Automation Podcast is sponsored by the fantastic folks at Sauce Labs. Their cloud-based test platform helps ensure your favorite mobile apps and websites work flawlessly on every browser, operating system, and device. Get a free trial. Visit testguild.com/Sauce Labs and click on the exclusive sponsor section to try it for free for 14 days. Check it out. Hey, Adam. Welcome to the Guild.
Hey, thanks for having me. I think I'm going to be stealing that intro for my conference submissions from now on.
Awesome, cool, good. I thought I messed it up because you've done so much, so I tried to condense it. So awesome. So Adam, like I said, you've done a lot. Is there anything I missed that you wanted folks to know about?
I think that kind of does cover the breadth of the last 20 years, really. And yes, I did maintain Selenium IDE. I brought it back from the dead originally. And I jokingly, but kind of not, say that I've been apologizing for that ever since.
So that's funny because I think they revived it yet again, a newer version. Have you seen that version? Any thoughts around it?
Yeah, I've played with it. It looks pretty cool. It does overcome a lot of the shortcomings that the original IDE had. My concern, as was with the original IDE, is that for full bore automation, I feel that too many people are going to use that instead of dropping into the code level to do stuff. But I think that's just an education thing that is ongoing in the automation community.
Absolutely. And a lot of people blame the tool, but it's really the technique or people abusing the tool, I guess, is what happens.
Yeah, we provide too many. There's almost too many tools and too many ways to use the tools, and unfortunately, there's more ways to fail with the tools that we provide than there is to succeed.
Absolutely. And talking about failure, I think you have a famous saying. It's like almost your motto that you don't care about automated tests. You care a lot about where and how you run them. You've been saying this for a while. I've been binge watching some of your videos, and I think I saw some in 2011, 2012. You're talking about infrastructure, and it still seems to be a neglected area of automation. People still are talking about flaky automation. When you talk about infrastructure at a high level, what do you mean by that saying?
By that, I mean it's all of the things around executing your scripts, not including your actual scripts. So where your automation environment resides, how it's constructed, how it resets, how your Selenium server, where is it running? How accessible are the ports? How economic is your environment? Is it just running 24/7 when only works during business hours? All those things, I think, are the next sort of wave of disruption coming to the automation space. Cloud providers like Sauce Labs and such hid that problem from a lot of companies because they just manage it, they move their grid. But a lot of companies still are running internally their own Selenium grids or other technology stacks. And it is my belief that has not been disproven, but neither has it necessarily been scientifically proven, that a lot of organizations, they just spin up their own servers. The manager has a credit card that they don't have to ask questions about. So open up their own AWS account with their own, they just spin up the EC2 instance and run it, and they don't know anything about security, about permissions, and whatnot. So my fundamental belief is that somebody's Selenium infrastructure has been used to compromise the corporate network. If you figure that Target, the big credit card breach that Target had was through their air conditioning units that were internet connected, then I guarantee you that somebody's Selenium infrastructure or their testing infrastructure has been used to compromise their networks. And just we didn't know that we could hide things from the internet. By default, they start up and they're publicly available. Or we didn't lock down a port, or we didn't patch it, or whatever. So that's why I say I don't actually care about your scripts anymore. A lot of the patterns that people are still employing are the ones that we developed 10, 12 years ago. So we've largely figured out what it takes to solve the quote unquote flaky script problem, and how to run our tests to be more efficient, and how to select tests for partial execution. We know how to do these things, but what we don't know yet, or what we really haven't spread throughout the testing community, is that you need to actually care about your infrastructure as well.
Why do you think it's still such an issue? Like I said, you've been speaking about almost like 9 years now. Is it because the skill set? Or is it always like another team that, they'll handle the infrastructure and people just don't even think about it when they're creating the automated test?
I think it's more of the latter. Partially it's, I think it's, silos and skill sets. So a lot of people that are doing automation are, they're not ops people, or they've not or they've grown up in the cloud and they've not had to do the ops things. Like, I'm 42, I think. And so I've been doing this, managing my own infrastructure and computers in the cloud since I was like 15. Like my first automation job was in 98. And, we were doing full automation with racks of 1U machines that we would have to reset by floppy disk. So I've always had to be concerned about the infrastructure that things run on. But now, you don't a lot of that is abstracted away from people. So I was hoping that the sort of the DevOps stuff would leak into the testing space, but it hasn't quite yet. There are some projects that provide, sort of Selenium in a box type services put inside containers. But even that requires, more knowledge than a lot of testing teams possess. So then you have to tap into the ops team, and they're busy running production. And test is a cost center. So they don't necessarily get the attention that they should require if they knew what the risk profile was.
So I believe you have like 5 pillars that maybe will help people guide them with the infrastructure. One's operational excellence, one's security, one's reliability, one's performance efficiency, and one's cost optimization. Are these the pillars you think if people followed, they'd have it better with infrastructure? If so, maybe we can go through each one of these, what they mean.
Yeah, so those pillars are actually blatantly lifted from Amazon's well-architected framework. So there's an entire team that maintains those. And what's really cool about the well-architected framework is that even though it is written by Amazon and all of their examples use Amazon products, it really is cloud neutral. If you just swap out, product offering A with product offering B, it's a cloud neutral framework to base your thoughts around on how you're going to build these things. They've actually even published sort of a white paper to prove this, where I don't remember the company was able to slash their Azure bill by like 35% by just implementing the policies and the practices in the paper. And they realized, we are running these giant servers 24/7 when we only need them between 1 and 5 on Friday afternoons or something. And so it's a useful way of thinking about, your infrastructure, because it is 5 silos that, when in a cloud context, are really important. So obviously the security one is a big one. That's sort of the the way that's the hook that you get people to be interested and concerned about their infrastructure. But the cost optimization is also, I think, an underlooked one, and that's the sort of thing where you can scale your environments up during working hours, scale them down after, over the weekends. Are you using right-sized machines? Are you using, the appropriate technologies? Is there new technologies? Are you constantly evaluating them? So there's the 5 pillars in the well-architected framework, and like you say, it gets updated about quarterly. It's a free download on Amazon's website. I don't work for Amazon. I just think it's a really great framework.
The company I used to work for, we used a solution called SkyTap. And once we started using that, management then was able to say, wait a minute, our tests are taking way too long. So it helped almost drive better practices with automation because, like you said, the cost was so much for keeping this environment up all the time. So is that one of the benefits you see, is if you have a solid infrastructure plan, that it helps create more reliable automation, because then you could see get feedback from the tests running, and then to make it better based on cost, try to figure out why your tests are taking so long or may not be as reliable as they should be, or things like that.
Well, the advantage of caring about the cost of your automation is that you can then answer the question of how much is our test costing us? That used to be the hardest question to be able to quantify. Oh, well, you've got 10,000 scripts. Okay, that's fantastic. What's the cost benefit analysis of that? So we have to constantly be maintaining these things. We have to investigate failures. We have to keep constructing new ones. Then there's just the execution cost. There's the person cost of having 10,000 scripts, and then there's the execution cost of running them. And then, but what's the benefit of that? We don't know that, and we're still missing part of the equation of what is the actual underlying infrastructure costing. So that should be a very simple number to manage by going into whatever cloud provider or billing console and here's my automation bucket, and it cost me $76.53. Just like if you used a cloud provider or a browsers in the cloud provider, you would know by looking at the invoice how much it cost you. So it helps you have better conversations. It's still going to be really challenging to argue what the benefit of automation is. Well, did we catch bugs? I don't know. Did it? You start to get very philosophical really quick. Why do you do the automation? Is it to ensure that the same things worked? Is it that you want to make sure that the developers have trained their testing practices to make sure your tests pass? Right? It can get really interesting. But the big thing, like I say, is you can answer how much the infrastructure costs.
So what's your go-to answer when someone asks you that? What's the point of automation?
Well, to me, my go-to answer is that it makes sure that it has a baseline level of quality for a human to attack it. It is my, we don't know, and this, it comes out of my growing up as a tester through the testing ranks as compared to a developer or an ops person, that, a human is really what, finds the problems in the application. But what the automation does is tell you that these are the parts that you don't need to worry about because they're behaving. But if you run an automation load and it comes back with the errors over here, now, this is where I should probably spend some time looking at what changed, what interesting thing here has happened, so that I can, spend a day looking at, the new account profile management settings. Oh, did that change recently? Because I'm talking with the team all the time. Yes, it did. What was the things that happened? Where are the ripples? And, so that, to me, that's where automation really, what it's for. It's not going to tell you that it's, perfect and good to go. It's, here's this baseline that we have established, and we are maintaining that baseline. And so now use your human judgment whether or not you want to, do some manual testing, or do we want to bump it up to the next environment, which could actually, in fact, be production.
So that applies to functional automation, but I believe also with infrastructure. I believe you said in one of your I don't remember which session, but that you should perform operations as code. So is that something you could automate? Is that like tools you would use like Puppet, Chef, or Ansible or something to make your infrastructure more repeatable? And
one of the quotes that get thrown back at me periodically is that, if you're logging into whatever cloud provider's console to make infrastructure changes, you're doing something wrong. You're incurring technical debt. So everything should be, every piece of your infrastructure, certainly beyond just the test infrastructure, should be specified in code of some sort. That could be the native code platform offerings like in Amazon, it's CloudFormation, or something that's cloud neutral like Terraform, which is the one that I'm currently ramping up on, because I really enjoy vendor lock-in. I think that if you're not locking yourself into a cloud provider, you're doing something wrong. But what Terraform provides is that cross-platform capabilities. So especially in like a WebDriver context, I could have my Windows and my Firefox and Chrome and whatnot on Linux and Windows running aside Amazon, and I could have my Mac, Safari on Mac running in something like Mac Stadium or what have you. And if I'm just using CloudFormation, I can't configure that third party using it. Whereas Terraform, because it's just a wrapper around APIs, I can, through the same set of infrastructure setup scripts, control all of my providers. So all that stuff is just a DSL, a text-based DSL checked into whatever repo system you're using. You can write tests, you can write code sniffers and formatters, and treat it just like any other production level development project.
one of the things I heard a lot about, and I've been hearing about security a lot, but for some reason, 2019, a lot of talking on my podcast about security testing, and also, so I think it's going to be really bigger in 2020. And you mentioned security as well as one way to get people to think more about their infrastructure. What are your thoughts about security in 2020, and how does it relate to infrastructure that people need to be aware of?
So I think it's still, especially, and this is kind of sneak peek stuff for Selenium Grid 4. I think the Selenium community specifically is going to have a big wake-up call around security and how they may be thinking that they're operating securely, but they aren't necessarily. In the alpha that just got pushed for Selenium 4 last week, we can now communicate with the server over HTTPS. Again, as a CTO, I have to go through vendor, vetting processes, and they really don't like anything that's not HTTPS. And the Selenium Grid, since its inception, has only talked HTTP. So I talked about this in London with Simon, and then he created a ticket and assigned it to me. So apparently the squeaky wheel has to provide its own grease. So that's available in the most recent release, the most recent alpha of the Selenium Grid. So in security for everybody's going to have to look at their infrastructure and start securing those connections now that they can. Also around node registration for the grid, there's a couple nasty little attack vectors that are theoretically possible that will be closing up in time for Selenium Grid 4 as well. So in the automation space and infrastructure, the capabilities to secure things are being provided now finally for people. So that's another reason for people to look at their infrastructure. It's not just always been running and it just works. Well, now you have reason to revisit it.
Earlier, you mentioned not rogue teams, but people that have credit cards and they can open up AWS instances and you don't necessarily may know about it in the company. Does that come back to traceability, having a plan in place to be able to monitor your actual infrastructure, what the heck people are doing?
Yeah, and that's hard in that case because you're opening up your own AWS account, so you can't really trace that because it's unknown. I did a bunch of time at HP, and they called those all black ops projects, and HP at the time, this was sort of during the Carly years where it was this monster company. it had no idea what accounts it had where, and it had no idea what services it was running where. And it basically, there was an email that got sent out to everybody that said, you have 6 months to let us know what all these skunk works projects are. Otherwise, if we hear about one, you're fired. So because it was just so out of control, because they couldn't secure their corporate systems, because it's like, well, we just signed up for this Salesforce account with a default password, and it didn't have our corporate password rules. So now somebody could compromise there, and it's all a skilled bad guy needs is a tiny little thread to pull on, and they own you. Yeah, it's not as if it's necessarily rogue teams. A lot of times when I've seen that happening, it's because they're stymied by corporate policies, that it's just like, we need to have, this type of browser on this type of machine, and corporate provisioning doesn't have it for them, or it'll be a 6-month wait for it, where they can just get it inside, cloud provider X, for $20 a month, and the manager can expense it. So here we go. So it's not as if rogue teams kind of implies malicious intent. A lot of times it's just people trying to get their job done in what they perceive as the best way possible for the company, but it actually works against company best interests.
So one of the last points about infrastructure is when something fails, you need to be able to self-diagnose it really quickly and have it self-heal. Is this something you've seen any advancements in recently, like with these AI, machine learning, so-called type of solutions that have been coming out recently?
On the infrastructure side of things, this is the whole notion of chaos engineering, which I think originated out of Netflix. There's a couple companies that bill themselves as just chaos engineering companies. I think Gremlin is one. And so those, if you introduce, chaos agents into your infrastructure, I think that might be a little overkill for just your test infrastructure. But if your corporate infrastructure is doing it, then absolutely, there's no reason not to be running it against your test infrastructure. And I believe, again, in a Selenium context, the new grid will make that level of, I don't want to say the word observability, but I'm stumbling on a word, so I'm going to use that. How do we observe the failures in our systems? So, but a lot of that becomes also what cloud provider you are using, because again, we're not in the actual script levels that are failing. It's a database connection got dropped, or somebody tried to roll out another instance and you've hit account limits or something, which are all built-in ability to monitor using their monitoring tools. So again, the testers, if they are responsible for their infrastructure, need to really leverage what their providers are providing them, and take off the testing hat for a little bit and put on the ops hat for a little while to figure out, how do we do this thing more effectively.
Cool. So I want to switch gears really quick, Adam. I never understood, you have like 2 or 3 jobs. And I never followed up on it. You're the CTO of the mobile experience company in Element 34. Do you also do consulting, and you contribute to open source projects still? What's going on there?
Yeah, I do way too much. My dad was a workaholic, and when he retired, they replaced him by 4 people. And so I come about that naturally. So my day job is CTO of a marketing tech company, outside of Toronto. I also run a small consulting company called Element 34, where less so in the last little bit, because being a CTO is a full-time job. I have helped people be effective creating Selenium and WebDriver scripts, as well as looking at their entire delivery pipeline, because as trendy as continuous delivery is, we've been in the automation space and been doing continuous delivery for well over a decade, because we had to, in order to reset environments and get code to run things against. And then when I'm not doing those things, I am part of the Selenium community. I have had the commit bit for a number of years, and I have been working on sort of creating or filling the security holes that I have been complaining about for a number of years in time for Selenium Grid 4, which should be out in June, I think we're targeting. So there's that. And then when I have free time, I referee roller derby. So yeah, there's many different things that I do all at once, but the first three are take up 30 hours of a 24-hour day.
Cool. So Adam, besides infrastructure, is there anything else you're really passionate about in the automation space that you think's been neglected?
I feel like the next soapbox that I'm going to be getting onto after the infrastructure stuff becomes more mainstream is really documentation. The new Selenium site looks fantastic, and the docs have been rewritten. Again, they're fantastic. They look great, and have been updated. But the one thing that sort of drives me a little bonkers online, and this is where I should learn to be offline, but sometimes, is sort of my get off the lawn factor. Because I think I mentioned this before, a lot of the patterns that we use to write scripts, we figured out how to do these things 10 years ago. But people are still complaining about flaky scripts. People are still not running their scripts through a scriptable proxy in order to black hole the Facebook pixel, which will speed up your tests. There's lots of things like this that people are just rediscovering. And it feels like a reinvention of the wheel. And I used to get really upset by this. It's like, come on, folks, like, do your history. Like, do your research. We know how to write all these things. There are examples. They're 10 years old, but they still apply. And I realized that wasn't necessarily fair, because what we, as sort of the leaders in the community, if I can call myself that, have done a really bad job is communicating these, solutions to people. So the sort of the big challenge after the infrastructure, I think, is how do we better communicate solutions to people, especially as they're starting their automation journey, so that we can just have people being more effective, more quickly. That's fantastic grammar. Than they necessarily are. We don't need to have them, struggle with duplicating locators in the scripts, and because it's like, well, there is this general hand-wavy concept called page objects where you can encapsulate these things. Like, oh my God, this is brilliant. Why didn't anybody tell me this? It's like, well, sorry, like it's out there, but not well enough, apparently. So I don't know. I have no idea how to solve that problem. And so that's, I think, going to be a very sticky problem to solve, because it's a people problem. Infrastructure we could solve with code. So it's a very simple problem to solve. As soon as you start getting into people problems, well, that gets a whole lot more challenging to address. So that I'm starting to put on more people's radar, but I really have no answer on how to do this, because Stack Overflow, searchability is a challenge. There's a whole bunch of community involvement challenges, not to mention just the level of toxicity that can exist on that site. And we are flooded with search results right now. Again, when I started, there wasn't, Google was barely even a thought. So when somebody posted an article on something, it was easy to find because there wasn't 1,000 variants of that same article. So what was the canonical answer? So I have no idea how to solve this thing, but there's still a lot more work to go on the infrastructure side. So I'm not even trying to solve that one yet.
Okay, Adam, before we go, is there one piece of actionable advice you can give someone to help them with their automation, infrastructure, testing efforts? And what's the best way to find or contact you?
So my piece of advice is care about your infrastructure. Doing automation is more than just writing scripts and executing them. It's everything about it, including where it runs. So go to a whiteboard, draw out all the little boxes of, this is the machine that our scripts execute on. This is where the scripts execute against. This is the machine that controls that execution. These are the people that have the keys to these various machines. How are they configured? Once you have that map, that illustration drawn out, you'll be amazed how complicated your actual infrastructure is. And that should be enough to scare you into looking at how to better manage it. And then the best way to contact me is either on Twitter. My handle is just Adam Goucher, or you can email me at adam@element34.ca.
Thank you, Adam, for your automation awesomeness. For links to everything of value we covered in this episode, head on over to testguild.com/A like automation 288. And while you're there, make sure to click on the Try It for Free Today link under the exclusive sponsor section to learn all about Sauce Labs' awesome products and services. And if you haven't already, make sure to head on over to guildconferences.com and register for Automation Guild, the largest online conference in the world dedicated 100% to helping you succeed with creating end-to-end automation awesomeness. Our goal is that you'll learn a tip, tool, technique, or best practice that's going to help you or your team accelerate your automation efforts in the new year. You don't want to miss out. Head on over to guildconferences.com and register today. So that's it for this episode of the Test Guild Automation Podcast. I'm Joe, and my mission is to help you succeed with creating end-to-end, full-stack automation awesomeness. As always, test everything and keep the good. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Test Guild Automation Podcast. Head on over to testguild.com for full show notes, amazing blog articles, and online testing conferences. Make sure to subscribe to join the guild and continue your testing journey. This has been a Joe Calantonio production.